Hi and welcome to Best in Tesla. So you probably heard the buzz around green hydrogen and e-fuel being the next big thing replacing fossil fuel. But there is a kicker. These so-called solutions are more like a mirage in the desert of innovations. We are talking about projects like the flagship one here in Denmark, which was meant to be a beacon for green fuel production, but has now been scrapped. Just like so many e-fuel and green hydrogen products before it. Why? Because it's too expensive and there are no takers for these high-cost fuels. Companies like Ørsted, backed by big names and even bigger promises, are pulling out, realizing that e-fuels for transportations is not just inefficient, but economically unviable, and still polluting the air. So let's check it all out and let's dive right in. So we still have many companies and organizations trying to keep the old business model of the fossil fuel industry alive by trying to make hydrogen or e-fuel sounds like a good idea. But again and again we see huge projects being cancelled because it's simply too expensive and therefore are no customers for these very expensive products. And one of the products that has been added to the list of failures is the flagship one, green hydrogen to methanol project here in Denmark. Ørsted scrapped the flagship one green hydrogen to method project 2 years after FID. FID stands for Final Investment Decision. It is a crucial stage in mega energy project as it is the final stage to decide whether to go ahead with the project or not. In other terms, it is the final stage to determine if the investment in the project would be beneficial or not. And here we are talking about 2 years after FID. So there is a very important lesson to be learned here. Don't take FID before having committed customers to your project. But of course they don't have customers for this insane expensive fuel. It just doesn't make sense, and that is why the Danish developer is exiting the green fuel market, which it says is developing slower than expected. No shit, Sherlock. As Alex also wrote on X on this topic, the Danish wind-powered company Ørsted has cancelled plan for Europe's largest production plant for e-fuel. The plan was to build a factory that would produce 55,000 tons of e-methanol per year from 2025, primarily for shipping and industry. The Danish company took over the flagship one project in the Swedish town of Örnsköldsvik 2 years ago and finalized the investment. Bill Gates' Breakthrough Energy was also involved, and the EU Commission and European Investment Bank pledged funding. E-fuels are structurally uncompetitive due to their low efficiency and high cost, and will therefore never play an important role in the transformation process towards electrification. Furthermore, they emit toxic gases just like all fossil fuel systems and are therefore completely nonsense from an ecological point of view too. Yes, exactly. But it is of course not all in the car industry that is blinded of how good e-fuel would be for the combustion engine. Some are just looking at the science to see if this will work, like Volkswagen. Volkswagen is getting it, just like they got under Herbert Diess that hydrogen was not going to work. As Herbert said, just look at the science. And Volkswagen even made this chart showing just how inefficient hydrogen is and how costly it is to make, as Mercedes has also pointed out, and why they stopped development of the hydrogen car after 30 years of development. As they said, it will always be too expensive. And the Volkswagen brand chief Thomas Schefter also said about e-fuel, the discussion around e-fuel is widely misunderstood. They have a role to play in existing fleet, but won't replace EVs. That's completely nonsense. Look at the physics of making e-fuels. We don't have enough energy as it is. Why waste it on e-fuels? Exactly, Thomas. Hydrogen is too expensive to ever use as a fuel, and e-fuels are even more expensive as it is made from green hydrogen. And BMW CEO Zipse knows this, but is still fighting for them to be able to use e-fuel in the cars after 2035 because he knows how stupid expensive this fuel is. So he of course wants the government to help out with the cost of e-fuels. As he says, any promises to include combustion engine cars running on e-fuels after 2035 must be backed by investments. Yes, because Zipse just want to be able to continue to sell their ICE vehicles with big fat profits on them after 2035, but know if the price of e-fuel costs much more than petrol, which is thus the first e-fuel made by green hydrogen and CO2 is 100 times more expensive than traditional petrol today. But it's made from green hydrogen. Already there we should see a big red flag. Green hydrogen is also very expensive to make, and then use that to make another fuel will make sure that green e-fuel will always be too expensive for ever. And we do need green hydrogen for our steel and fertilizer industry, and we are nowhere near getting to that 120 million tons of hydrogen that we need for that green. So why waste green hydrogen that we make from electricity made by renewables in the first place to make another fuel once again? This is just stupidity squared. It's like watching a contest of seeing how many steps can we actually make from well to wheel, and how expensive can we actually make it. The market for e-fuel is going to be tiny. It's going to be for the rich people that owns their Ferraris and Porsche and still want to be able to drive these old classics after 2035. They will never get this inefficient system to become affordable, and that is what Zipse knows, so he of course wants the government to invest in all of this, so he can just continue selling more ICE cars after 2035, because they can just run on e-fuel, but they still pollute the air. And that is really what the whole thing is about, right? E-fuel is not zero emission. They pollute from the tailpipe just like a regular fossil fuel car as it gets burned in the combustion engine. It doesn't make sense whatsoever, just as Transport and Environment wrote in their report. E-fuel cars are not zero emission. E-fuel cars should not be designated as a zero emission for the purpose of regulatory compliance, given they still emit toxic air pollutants. Otherwise, it would undermine efforts to reduce pollution and establish a low and zero emission zones in European cities. We really need to stop wasting time and taxpayers' money on e-fuels and hydrogen as fuel. We need the hydrogen we use in other industries as a chemical, but not as a fuel, to become green. That should be our main focus with hydrogen. Get that hydrogen green first, and then let EVs take over our transportation sectors, as renewables are already today the cheapest form of energy we can create. And that is why people are saving thousands of dollars on fuel every year by having an electric car, already as it is today, and that will only come down in price as more renewables are coming into the mix of energy. As we can see in my country, where we sometimes have so much renewable in our grid that electricity becomes free, or we even get paid to charge up our cars. At the same time, battery prices are coming down, and so will the EVs themselves, as we have only just started with production of EVs. So Wright's law has hardly come into place. And Wright's law says for every cumulatively doubling of units produced, cost will fall by a constant percentage. And that is what we have seen with any new technology throughout the years. They will start off very expensive, but over time the cumulative production scales and the cost comes down. And we are in a very early days when it comes to EVs, which will drop significantly in price over the next decade or two. And that will just make any combustion engine vehicle obsolete. They will always be too expensive in the future, and they will be too polluting and will not be allowed on the roads in our cities here in Europe. And they will always be 3 to 5 times more expensive to fuel, as all these alternative fuels all starts with renewable energy that can just go straight into the EVs. But for hydrogen and e-fuel, they have to waste about 2/3 of the energy we have created in the first place. And e-fuels are even worse. EVs are the car of the future, as it is the most efficient car you can get. And it runs on the most affordable form of fuel we have, and will give us the most miles per kilowatt hour of energy. And when the battery dies in an EV, they can just be recycled into new batteries, as we have already seen Tesla and Redwood Materials are doing today. EVs will become part of the circular economy and help us to use only 1/3 of the energy in the transportation sector as we do today, because electricity is so efficient and fossil fuels are so inefficient. Combustion engine vehicles will never become part of a circular economy, no matter what kind of fuel they're running on, and will always emit toxic gases and polluting our air, and will forever be the most expensive and inefficient choice of transportation. And thank you for watching. And until next time, take care out there and be nice.